Alright, shall we get to it? It's time for lightning. I'm gonna try. I don't think I'm gonna keep doing the card numbers. I didn't really think I liked it last video. If you guys did last video, definitely let me know in the comments and I can resume doing them for the final two videos in the series. But for now, here we are. We have Assassin. Assassin is a 1-drop standard unit, category FFTA, with 3,000 power. I think every element got a 1-drop with 3,000 power this set. When Assassin enters the field, you may pay Lightning, Lightning, and 1. When you do so, you do 3,000 damage to a forward. Why would you want to do that? Well, you can put Assassin into the break zone to break a damaged forward. So this becomes 4 CP, break anything that can take damage. This is going to be really surprising to some people. I think this is, like, very serviceable. I don't think this is an all-star. This is not amazing. And it does actually have some competition, hilariously, from the exact same game. This Ewin is actually a really good card when you can make him work properly. A 1 CP 2K that breaks anything that's damaged. But this can set itself up, which Ewin can't. And I actually really think there's some underexplored things in Lightning with like the like mini damage and then break. There's a Sakura that draws if your opponent has a damaged forward, which is just Pot of Greed. I've had a friend use this against me to kind of just dig through their deck and set themselves up for a big combo. So it's expensive, it's not perfect, and but you can do a lot worse. So I don't think this gets slotted. I think it's just a little bit too low impact. But also the multiplayable helps a lot here. Also, do remember there is a lot of support for 1-drops, and especially in Lightning, you want good 1-drops because of Puck. Puck lets you play a 1 and a 2 if you're on damage 3, and this is a very solid choice for the 1-drop. In fact, I'm just curious. Lightning forward cost 1. Is there any other ones you'd want to play over this? Solir is really good. Objang and Menajig, Hyo, Vivi. So there is competition, but it is not bad. Very genuinely not a bad forward. Very good and limited as well. If you could trade a 4 CP for your opponent's forward, you're doing pretty well. Alize, this is a hero, and this is also the pre-release full art. So, when Alize enters the field, you get to play a job sign on the 7th Dawn, forward of cost 3 less in your break zone. That's just good. When a water forward enters your field, choose a forward opponent controls, dull it. This only happens once per turn. I don't really get why they had to put that on there. I get why. They're trying to make her a pair with her brother. But let's just go right here. We're going to go forward. Scion of the 7th Dawn. Let's just go over the targets for her real quick. Opus 5-ish Dola is a really nice one. Urianger is okay. That gets you a monster back. Alfino gets you a search for any character here. This Stola is still really good and really likes coming in off of another Scion because then she can immediately attack or give herself haste and first strike. And this is still a very, very strong special. This also would kill something on entry, so like this is like the best removal. You have this Stola, which is very similar. I will say, this is a very weird thing to say, but this Stola, if played off Alize, is better than this one. This one does become unblockable, which this Stola doesn't, but this Stola does everything else. Rajatia is really good, and then Alfino for removal, Urianger for search. No shortage of good targets for this card. The biggest question for me is that Alize is suddenly a very tightly contested name. Namely because this one is so good. And sure, You have to get to damage 3 before she becomes really insane. But even outside of that, this card I think has seen a ton of play in exactly 13 due to just how good it is to get Vanille specials off. And this one doesn't play nicely with that, or in the same way. So I think there's still an argument to play the old Alize, I'll be honest with you. There is no reason to ever play the Opus 3 Alize, by the way, anymore. I think it's really close, and closer than people think. I think even the 2k power buff really makes a shockingly large difference. With Oracle of Light, this Alize can live an Amaterasu, and this one can't. So, it's really, really close. Angeal. Oh, sorry. Very good card though. This will see a lot of play. A lot of people really like this. I will say I have one small nitpick with the Scion support this set, and that is that I really liked that Scions before this were like this grindy control mid-range deck, right? And now they're kind of turning into this balls to the wall aggro deck that's trying to race 13, and I don't really like that shift for them. Which kind of sucks. I really liked my Scions list from Opus 17, and I don't know how much I'll be revisiting the archetype this set. Angeal. When Angeal enters the field, you can choose a forward to cost 4 or less. If you control 2 or more job soldier, break it. So this is actually not terrible. So you need probably a soldier backup, meaning you need either a cloud or a restrictor, I think, to make this. There's a couple cloud backups. The other option here, honestly, is you can even go light cloud into this and then just break something. There's potential. I don't know that this is amazing. Also, you can sack it to gain 3k power. It's not a reason to play the card, but it's a nice bonus. So I think it's, solid beyond just being a partner for Zach in the pre-release. So there's definitely a world where this sees some play, especially in if you go Ice Lightning, this just says break a 4 cost forward because Restrictor is such an important card. If I can get to, where's Restrictor? There it is. So, yeah. Estinian. So I think I kept joking about this, and I used to call this the Timmy card of the set. So, some background. Real quick, if you don't know what a Timmy card is, a Timmy card, it's a Magic the Gathering term for a card that is really flashy and really, really cool, and completely garbage at high levels of tables. I think the most common example that I would give for a Timmy card is Ravana. Ravana is a card with no entry effects and no it's got protection, but it's awkward. But it can attack 4 times, and it's really freaking cool when it does. But it never goes off. Another example that I always think of is Behemoth K. Behemoth K to me is a classic Timmy card. Your opponent will play Behemoth K because when Behemoth K attacks, it does 2 damage at damage 5, right? When it attacks, it deals a damage, and then when it's blocked, it deals a damage. And it gets haste. I can count on one hand the number of times I've lost when a Behemoth K hits the field on the opponent's side of the field. It's not that good of a card. It's really cool. It's really flashy. Is it super powerful? Does it win games for you? No. I really thought Estinian was going to fall into that same guideline. However, these Timmy cards have one thing in common, which is that they're very expensive. And Estinian is not. Estinian costs 1 CP and a turn. And Estinian essentially reads unblockable. So I guess I should go over the effect on Estinian. Scion of the 7th Dawn, which is relevant. Category 14, Warp 1 for 1 lightning with haste. If it enters the field due to warp, Estinian gains Brave and can attack twice in the same turn. And when Estinian attacks, he gains 10,000 power and first strike. He becomes an 18k first strike. Your Warrior of Light is not blocking this guy. So this says either sacrifice forwards into me or take 2 damage for 1 CP. And that rate is really, really, really good. We talk about Blue Worm being a 0 CP 1 damage, but you would pay 1 for 2 damage as well. Is that enough? I think so. It is still vulnerable. You can, if you just dull him before your opponent goes to combat, then this card has no text. But I think it puts on a lot of pressure for your opponent the moment they see the warp, where they have to have an effect that removes it at instant speed. And a lot of decks can't do that. So I think it's good. I think it will see a lot of play. What the actual ratio will end up being, I don't know. It could be a 4 of in like really aggro heavy lists and like lower in others because lightning has a lot of recursion, but it could also just be good enough to be a 3 of, to have this card that says sacrifice your 2 worst forwards to me or take 2 damage. Kadaj. Kadaj is a 4 CP, 8k. When you enter the field, put in the field in the break zone, you get to do a 4k shrink to your opponent's forward. It's limited fodder. It's okay there. In draft, it's like a decent common. It'll kill something when it blocks. If your opponent blocks it, so whatever they block with will die. It's a good card to bring in off of Zac if Zac dies. It's not incredible, though. It's just... Kadaj has 2 really good names already, so we don't need this one for sure. Rajatia. This is actually really cool because this is the other new Scion name we have. So if you have a job standard unit category 14 character, Rajatia gains 3,000 power. You're probably going to want this to be a backup, and there's a lot of options here. I'm not going to go into all of them. I think Water has the best one because I think Water just got maybe the best backup in the game, and I'm not exaggerating, and it happens to be a standard unit category 14 character. I will say this is really cute lore. I love that it like plays off of Graha's like crush on the Warrior of Light. When Graha enters the field, pay X, search for a Scion, and play it onto the field. This is incredible. Every single target that Alize hits, this one hits. This also can bring Estinian out of the deck if you're trying to get that last point of damage for lethal. What are some other ones? Is it forward? It does say forward, so you can't get like a Minfilia out of the deck. You could pay 6 and get the Y'shtola. You can pay 7 to get Thancred out of the deck. Are those correct? Probably not, but like the option's really cool, and there's a lot you can do with the card. I think it's really interesting. I think it'll see a lot of play. Again, I don't really love the way they made Scions work. I would have rather seen like a cipher printed for Scions than like this like generic swarm capability they gave it. But the cards are good, and the deck is still going to be powerful, so I can't really complain there. Illusionist, 2 CP backup. Choose a forward if it deals damage to an opponent's forward. Damage increases by 2,000 instead. This is like okay. It does pair very nicely with First Strike, by the way. Essentially on a First Strike forward that's attacking or blocking, it's a 2,000 power buff. It's really good for like a Squall to like round up that. You can round up a Luso ping to being a 10k ping. Like, there are worlds where this card is good, but for the most part, I think the only other reason I would consider seeing this is probably the best FFTA backup in Lightning. Yeah, this is definitely the best FFTA backup in Lightning. So, if for some reason you ever decided to do, if anybody ever decided to go back to this Marsh engine, then this would be the optimal Lightning backup for it, in like a Water Lightning Marsh deck. Is that ever like a playable archetype again, where you go like Ezel into Marsh, Marsh into a backup, and then you can attack with the Marsh to draw? I don't think so, but like it still does color fix you. It's not the worst. Like for a low rarity, cheap archetype, if you were like having like a pauper format that's like commons and rares only, maybe. But we're probably past the point for something like this being good. The Emperor. So the cost required for the character's when it controls to use action abilities is increased by 2. This is really good. This shuts down Rajatia, makes sure their Warrior of Light's more expensive. Warrior of Light, Rosa Warrior of Light now costs 6 instead of 0. And notably, this is not a when, so you can't Amaterasu to kill the Emperor on the stack of this. The forward also is... The Floodgate is very sticky as well. If he dies, he can just play another copy of himself. The other thing about this card that's really interesting... So first of all, you can play any Emperor. And there's a lot of really, really good ones. So we can't play a 4-cost, we can't play this Emperor. But we can play this one, which when it dies you can play a 5-cost, which includes this one or this one. Is there a viable Emperor deck? Probably not, but I do think there's also... I think the Opus 17 Emperor is one of the most underexplored cards in the game. This card is sneaky good. And there is a world where any deck that should be running 3 copies of this Emperor and 3 copies of this Emperor as a 1-drop, draw 2 on entry, right? And you can fire it twice at that point. That, like, 9k Brave doesn't take damage twice. Like, in anti-aggro shell, maybe you're in, like, a wind list or something like that. You can run, like... especially now, you can run the Wall Trail to put the other Emperors back in the deck if you draw them. Makes your arcs cost 4 with a 1 CP forward. There's a lot of potential for Emperors, and every time they print more Emperor names, the better this card gets, which makes kind of the package more coherent. Genuinely, at this point, I want them to just print an Ice Emperor backup that just says you can play a card named the Emperor you control, game multiplayable. Like, as a 2 CP Ice backup, and I just want to see what that deck looks like. What is the deck that plays 30 copies of the Emperor, and how does it do? Like that sounds really cool to me. And they seem to be scared of it. Like, there's so many Emperors that are like, hey, if you have more Emperors, do this. If you have, this one doesn't do it. Search for Emperor, play it onto the field. Search for Emperor, play it onto the field. Search for Emperor, remove it from the game. Search for Emperor, play it onto the field, dull. Like, there's something that could be really fun there, but we're missing just the one card to make it all tick. Anyways, this card is solid. How much play it'll see depends on how good the Rajatia Cecil stuff is. If you can make like the Cecil tag out cost CP, we're in a much better spot, right? Moving along, Shadow Dragon. Shadow Dragon is a really interesting card. So it's a monster. It's our hero monster of the set. Shadow Dragon, Category 4. Anytime you see Category 4, give a little thumbs up. When a card named Golbez enters the field, you may pay 1. If you do, play Shadow Dragon onto the field. So the weird issue with this card here is the Golbez names. Golbez is a card with no cheap forwards. Every single one of these costs 5 or more. The cheapest one is the warp one, but we're not ever casting this. We're trying to warp it. When it enters the field, choose a forward of cost 3 or less and break it. And then at the end of turn, becomes a forward with 3000 power, use it once per turn. A lot of people have been calling this an upgrade to Thunder Drake. It kind of is, and it kind of isn't. Breaking a 3 instead of just a 2 is nice, but the extra 1 cost is actually not that good. 3000 power is extremely low, and sure, it's just an incidental body you happen to get. But people underestimate one of the reasons that Blue Worm and Thunder Drake are actually really good is because they're 2 CP 6Ks, meaning they don't die to Brynhildr or Warrior of Light pings or anything like that when they animate, right? Not like you would ever actually use Warrior of Light to ping them off, but you get the idea. And this card doesn't have that luxury. It's also not multi-playable, which is one of the reasons those cards are so good. There's a really cool combo with Mira later on. Mira being the other Lightning Legend of the set. I think it's good. I think it'll see play. I think it remains to be seen how much play it will see. Core. Shoutouts to maybe the worst card of all time. It's a 4 CP 8K. It's a black belt. If you control a king, gains 2,000 power. This is intended to be Regis, I believe. And when it's put from the field to the break zone, you can remove the top 10 cards of your deck from the game. When you do so, play Core from the break zone onto the field. Dull. Like, why? Why dull? Why 10? Why RFG instead of mill? Like, and only if you control a king. This card is horrible. Weaver is the Lightning of the cycle. Lightning doesn't have a lot of self-backup engines. I think the best one is Duke Larg into Ramza right now. Oh, no, actually, Akalia Cheval into Quan as well. Even so, Mono Lightning is maybe one of the weakest mono elements in the game. I don't see this really slotting anywhere, unfortunately. Johnny is a card I do see slotting in a lot of places. 4 CP backup. When it enters the field, choose a character other than card named Johnny, add it to your hand. They have continued the trend of giving Lightning a backup that adds a character to your hand on entry. If you go back to the last couple sets, we have Elgo. And then before that, we had Sid Sophiar. And then we had Sid of Clan Gully. And then we had Chadley. Yeah, Opus 15 was the last time they printed a backup that doesn't recur a forward on entry. But even there, Objang, get a backup, or get a forward back. Like, they're really loving giving this effect. Zemus. So we're almost at the point where we have a critical mass of these in Lightning, where you can play 7 backups with different names that all recur characters on entry. And I think that's actually really interesting. Johnny, why is Johnny different? Well, you can pay 2 and sack him to get a category 7 character in your break zone back to hand. This is fantastic as well. If we go down the category 7s that happen to be in Lightning, I'm just going to make it really easy. First of all, he can get himself, which is really funny. I don't think you would do that very often. We're going to say category 7 forward, right? We have Cloud, Sonin, Billy Bob, Seth Roth. All of the Turks here. Like, these are all really good cards, and that's not going out of element at all. So, this card is really good. I think it'll see a lot of play. Seth Roth. This is a Warp 3, Category 7, 7 cost, 8k. When he enters the field, choose a forward other than himself and break it. And there's a special, choose a forward of 3 or less and break it. It's intended to be a draft common. It's not unplayable, especially in Vayne. So there's Warp 3 is kind of like the perfect length for Vayne, because what you can do is you can go Warp, play Vayne. Vayne removes the counter from the card you just warped. If Vayne lives the turn, Vayne then removes the counter to draw a second card, so Vayne becomes free, and the card comes in next turn. It becomes a Warp 1. If it's Warp 2, you wasted the Vayne trigger on the next turn. If it's so like odd number warps are actually really good for Vayne. Do I think this card is like super playable? It's going to show up in a lot of decks? Absolutely not. But it's neat. Chadley. When Chadley enters the field, you may discard a card, search for a lightning summon, and add it to your hand. Are you ready for the use for this? Boom, Ixion Searcher. We can run fewer copies of Ixion now, potentially. Alternatively, these Ramus are all really pretty playable. This Odin is actually really solid. We can use it as a way to kind of Foolish Burial and get more Odins into the break zone for the Opus 12 Odin, which is still a reasonably solid card. The Opus 6 Ramu is still not bad as well. You see, if you're against like Mono Wind, it's shown up as a tech card, meaning we can run one copy of this, like a copy of Ixion, and like a copy of this Odin, and just kind of toolbox between them as we need to. Maybe we go for like this Ramu instead, right? But yeah, that's really good. Another option, you can tap him, discard a summon, put Chadley in the break zone, and add a forward to your hand. It's just good utility. I think this card is really good. Will it see a ton of play? Probably not, but it is just a nice card. Ninja. I will restate the same thing. These should not have been reprinted. They should have been retrained. We should have gotten new versions of these cards. Pick up your foils because they'll be cheap, and these cards are probably going to be playable for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. Soya. Soya is a 2 CP EX burst, 4,000 power forward. When he enters the field, if you have 2 more summons in your break zone, draw a card. Already. We love to see it. When he attacks, cast a summon that costs 2 or less from your hand without paying the cost. Also incredible. This card is really good. Would be very good in Earth Lightning, which tends to play, 8-ish, 9-ish summons. Be good in Wind Lightning, if that ever is a thing, as a free cast that also can get value later on. You can go even play Fusoya, draw a card, if they don't answer it, attack the Fusoya, play a Chocobo for free, get the Fusoya to hand, and draw, so you go +1. Replay the Fusoya for a free cast, and kind of go off on your cast chain. It's just generally a pretty solid card. EX Burst is nice as well. That deck is also kind of hurting for EX Burst it wants to play. So, yeah. Nothing to complain about. Also would be very good in the Ice Lightning Terra builds that are going around, where it's like Man in Black, Terra, and Seth Roth. You could run Fusoya in there as well. Lots of really good cheap Shivas. Behemoth. 2 CP, 7k. Already really nice. That's the same rate as this Ramu, and this Ramu was actually not a bad card. I think this card got slept on a bit, but 2 CP for 7k is well above rate. And the nice thing about this card is, while you lose the instant speed, you can pay 2 lightning and tap it to break a damage forward. So it's also just a 4 CP Odin that loses instant speed, and that's totally acceptable. This Odin, what does 4 CP get you in lightning summons? It gets you a really bad, you get kind of breaks. Forward of 4 or less, break it on the Opus 1 summon. We're past that point now, but this is just perfectly serviceable. If the 7k doesn't kill, you can cash out the 2 to kill something. If not, hangs around as a monster to sack for Mira, or as a random thing where your opponent just can never let a valuable forward get damaged again. I think this card is super, super good. Mira. This is maybe my favorite card of the set so far in testing. So Mira is the other legend. Ignore the lightning, by the way. This card is not a lightning card. When an opponent's forward enters the field, you may pay 1 and discard a monster. If you do so, break that forward. This is essentially Trap Tricks with Rafflesia on a forward. Except, you can also, at any time, sacrifice a monster to play a Mira onto the field dull. This opens up so many things you can do. All of a sudden, now, uniquely named monsters are less of a problem. You can run 3 Typhon, and when you want to play your next one, sack it to the Mira. Mira then became a 3-cost forward that spun something to the deck on entry. Octomammoth, same thing. If there are monsters that do something when they die, like Cleone, you can draw a card. You can swing a Blue Worm, and then before it dies, sack it to the Mira, and you have Mira said, I did a point of damage, and I drew a card, so I was a 0 CP 5k. And you only need 1 Mira ever if she doesn't get removed from the break zone. This is one of the most interesting cards. I'm very curious to see what builds come out of the game with this deck. And I think this is the card I'm probably already brewing with the most. And it also helps that this is some of my favorite art in the game. Was very sad when I found out that these playing cards don't actually exist. I thought they totally did. Ramu, this is the hero summon for lightning. You get to do 2 of the following 3. You can dull a forward, you can do 5k to a forward, or you can give a forward haste. All 3 modes are fine. 2 CP is the right range for 13 to want this card. And 13 does just dulling forwards to get damage in. This is maybe going to replace some Beliases if you want more lightning CP for your 13 list. Just a generally good card. Very, very, very good card. Will it see a lot of play? I don't know. It depends on how aggressive, where the mana curve for the deck is. 13 in particular really likes low mana curve cards like this because If 13 has to go to a top deck, it can still cast this card at any time. If it just draws a lightning card plus Ramu. So I think this will see play. Just we'll see how much. Ramza. Been a while since we've seen a Lightning Knight Ramza. So 2CP 5k, when Ramza enters the field, if you have a crystal, Ramza gains haste, and when Ramza is put from the field in the break zone, choose a forward opponent controls and break it. These effects do not end at the end of turn, so you don't have to keep the crystal, you don't have to spend the crystal, you just have to see the crystal when you go into the field. It's just good. Your opponent is not incentivized to block them. There's no way to remove a crystal that your opponent is holding. So if you like bounce it, they can just replay it and do it again, and haste still means that Ramza's swinging in. You kind of just like have to let Ramza hit you. Or break one of your forwards. And I think for that reason, this card will see play if there are any Lightning decks that are playing crystals, which, spoiler alert, Lady Lilith and Melusine is still a really strong combo. Reeve is a 4CP backup with EX. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck, add a card to your hand, put the others at the bottom of your deck in any order. Another good Reeve. He just gets good cards all the time. And the question then becomes, is this better than the others? I don't think it is. I think searching for Vincent in Earth or Ice with Kate Sith or Vincent forward is probably better than getting a random of the top 3 cards of your deck. I think the ability to resurrect a forward is very interesting and very unique, and a reason to play that one. I don't really think there's a lot of situations where I'm going to play this one, but if like you're in a Lightning deck that isn't one of those colors, maybe just because it's a good card in general. So EX Burst does a lot of heavy lifting here as well. And that's it for Lightning. Really, really interesting cards this set for it. So I've got 2 more of these to go. I'll have to get Water and Light and Dark. I'll see y'all soon.